Hi everyone, my name is Isaac Poole and I'm happy to be here today at Philly CAM for a Creative Capital Award information session. Thank you all for coming out today, and thank you to whoever is watching on our YouTube live broadcast. I'm going to go over a few details about the award application process today, the award itself, and I'm also going to be just sort of having a casual conversation with our panel as well. At the end, we're going to open up for Q&A, so if you have any specific questions, we're more than happy to have a conversation with you as we get later on in the event. Okay, so really quickly, I just want to introduce the panel. So directly to my right is Karen Olivier. She is one of our awardees, and she received her MFA at Cranbrook Academy of Art and her BA at Dartmouth College. She has exhibited at the Gwangju and Busan Biennials, World Festival of Black Arts and Culture, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Whitney Museum of Art, MoMA PS1, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, Contemporary Art Museum Houston, the Mattress Factory, Sculpture Center, Drexel University, the University of the Arts, Ulrich Museum of Art, University of Delaware Museum, among others. In 2017, Olivier installed a large-scale commissioned work for Philadelphia's Mural Arts program in historic Vernon Park. In 2015, Olivier curated public works for Creative Time in Central Park and New York City's Percent for Art program. She received the 2018-2019 Rome Prize and has been the recipient of the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellowship, the Joan Mitchell Foundation Award, the New York Foundation for the Arts Award, a Pollock Krasner Foundation grant, the William H. Johnson Prize, the Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundational Biennial Award, a Creative Capital Award, and a Harpo Foundation grant. Her work has been reviewed in the New York Times, Time Out New York, The Village Voice, Art in America, Flash Art, Moose, The Washington Post, NKA, Journal of Contemporary Art, African Art, Freeze, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Hyperallergic, among others. Olivier is currently an associate professor and program head of sculpture at Tyler School of Art and Architecture. So a round of applause quickly for very impressive work. And then to Karen's right, we have Amy Smith, another Creative Capital awardee, also a wonderful workshop leader for our programs. Amy Smith is a dance and theater artist, educator, and facilitator. She was a founder and co-director of Headlong Dance Theater from 1993 to 2019. Headlong were Creative Capital awardees in 2002 for their dance theater fairy tale, Hotel Pool. In addition to Headlong, she has acted in and directed theater productions, performed in cabarets, and choreographed for opera. Amy has years of experience in the for-profit and nonprofit worlds doing accounting and financial management work. She teaches financial literacy workshops for artists and does tax preparation for approximately 100 artists annually. She has been active on boards and has done lots of local community advocacy work. Her personal mission is to empower artists and improve our financial well-being for our collective liberation. Let's give a round of applause to Amy Smith. And then finally, we have Karen Redrobe. She's one of our former reviewers of the award application, so she can give you some insight from the other side of the panel process. Karen Redrobe is the Elliot and Rosalind Jaffe Professor of Cinema and Modern Media and Director of the Wolf Humanities Center at the University of Pennsylvania. She is the author of Vanishing Women, Magic, Film, and Feminism, Crash, Cinema and the Politics of Speed and Stasis, and is now working on a new book, Undead, Animation and the Contemporary Art of War. She has co-edited 2 volumes, Still Moving. She is still the editor of Animating Film Theory, which explores the history of film theory's engagement and lack of it with animation. She is now co-editing a new volume with Jeffrey Scheibel entitled Deep Meditations, which explores the intersection of depth as a philosophical and visual concept. Her articles address a range of subjects, including the evolving role of film theory in the 21st century, war and the academy, violence in media, community media, animation theory, feminism and terrorism, death penalty photography, the relationship between cinema and contemporary art, and cinematic tempo. So a round of applause for Carol. Okay, fantastic. So I'm gonna start our slideshow. Okay, so who we are. A little bit of a primer on Creative Capital. We were founded in 1999 after the NEA, as a result of the culture wars, decided to stop funding smaller nonprofit re-granting organizations that directly provided support to working artists. So we did that as a way to defend freedom of expression and to give money to make sure that challenging ideas were continued to receive funding from a source. We're inspired by venture philanthropy concepts. So what that means is that we were interested in providing financial support to our awardees, but then also providing career counsel and other resources so that their practice as a whole could be ensured to be successful over the long term. So rather than giving only an award to an artist, a financial award, we made sure that they had infrastructure built into the award process, and then also had us as a key resource if they ever had questions moving forward. So yeah, over the past 20 years, we've given over $40 million, and that's been for 561 projects, and that's represented by 700 artists. So it's been a really amazing 20 years, and we're excited to keep moving forward. So yeah, we also make sure to support as many artists as we can nationally. We are based in New York City, and a large contingent of our artists are there, but we also make an effort to go out nationally to have these information sessions, to cultivate new audiences, and to make sure that the audiences we already have in these spaces remain engaged. We've been getting more and more diverse applicants from around the country, and we hope to see that trend increase. So yeah, that's also part of a larger mission that we have with our programs to help artists sort of sustain their practices where they're currently living and to not feel the pressure to come to a major city center. So to provide them funding and infrastructure where they are so they can build and thrive as they are at the moment. Okay, so what makes us different? We're one of the only national nonprofit organizations that offer an award on a free application basis. So our application is open to anyone. There are a few restrictions that I'll talk about in just a moment, but it is free of charge, and it is not sort of based on nomination or any sort of other factors like that. So something else that makes us different is that we support not only the artists but their careers, and we provide connections to multidisciplinary audiences, mainly through our Creative Capital Artist Retreat, wherein we bring together people from all different industries who are leaders in their field to offer resources to our new incoming awardees. And I think that's someplace where I'd initially like to open it up to the awardees that are on the panel. Could you speak just a little bit about the effect that the retreat had on your project and your careers moving forward, and just these sort of casual conversations that happened among people at the retreat?
It was amazing. It was summer camp, but very productive as well. I mean, it led to, I had meetings with a lot of regional curators, and I was kind of interested in that. I decided to kind of was less interested in, say, New York and LA. It's like, who gets a show there? So I ended up having meetings and these conversations with curators who I've had exhibitions with. And that wasn't the intent. It was like, help me, my project, what do I do? But it actually led to, they kept following my work, and then exhibitions happened after that. So it was also just great being around other artists who are in the struggle.
Yes.
And like, yay, we got this thing that was beyond what we could imagine.
Yeah. For me, it was the connections and the relationships that I built with other artists mostly, because the world of presenters who present experimental dance is so tiny. There's like 8 of them. So we already kind of knew those people. And we did strengthen relationships and built some new relationships there. But mostly for me, it was about the other artists that were at the retreat and this feeling of camaraderie and relationship building and community building. And I ended up collaborating with Chris Doyle, who I met at the first Artist Creative Capital Grantee Retreat, and then later Kevin and Jennifer McCoy, who we met at the Creative Capital Retreat. So it really, those relationships developed into really like fruitful artistic relationships too. Super grateful for that.
Great. Thank you so much. So
But the other thing that was great about it is that you can go back a second time.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was critical, because the first time it was like, great, and the second time I was in such a crisis with my project. So it was kind of great to be back and have that support. I don't know, do you still allow people to go back?
We do.
It was,
Yeah.
that was incredible, because I was really at a low point with my project. I had some people give me hugs and things.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk more about the retreat later, but I just wanted to bring that up in the beginning to give you an idea of some of these other non-monetary resources. In addition to those, we also provide support with financial strategies and goal setting, promotion and presentation preparation, and then just sort of basic tips on networking, how-tos, getting comfortable with verbal communications, those sorts of things. Okay, so we have a long-term commitment to the people that work on projects with us. We like to say that we're kind of almost getting married to you, at least to your project. We're in it for the long haul. We usually pick up a 2 to 5 year timeline of engagement with our awardee projects coming in. So it's best for you to come to us when you're at the very beginning of the research and development phase of your project or in very early stages of production. So if you are a filmmaker and you're looking for finishing funds, or if you are a performer who maybe is just looking for touring funds, this isn't the right grant for you. Again, this is because in addition to providing funds, we provide all these other services that help boost your career as well as your specific project. Yeah, so I'd like to ask again, how useful was that model for your projects? The fact that we didn't just like give you the money and let you run with it, like, was that beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, because I was part of a collaborative group and we had a kind of an infrastructure, we didn't need some of the infrastructural support the way I think a lot of individual artists do. So the things about financial management were kind of already in place. But for us, it was more about like how we talk about the project, how we meet potential partners, how we talk to them about the project, and actually meeting some potential partners. Our project Hotel Pool was a pretty challenging project to figure out where we were going to perform it. So Creative Capital helped us meet like some people who are expert in kind of marketing and thinking about like national network building. And then one of the most impactful pieces actually was after the premiere, we had an opportunity to perform the piece later in New York City, and Creative Capital gave us additional funds to be able to rent the equipment we needed, the lighting equipment we needed to be able to present it in this really important venue. So that was also awesome. The lead up was important, and then the like post-premiere additional support was critical too.
Can I ask a follow-up here?
Yeah.
If people find themselves in a situation where they don't need, for example, they don't need one part of it, like the financial infrastructure, is it flexible in that way, or what happens when?
Yeah, you pick and choose. There's sort of like a menu of people that are available to you, and you're like, oh, this is what I need.
Yeah, I remember I got the grant in 2005, but my project didn't happen until 2009. And I remember first they gave $10,000, and they said it's okay if you use that money just to pay your credit cards, which is what I did, which is exactly what I did with the 10,000. Because at that time they had said the average financial support was about 50,000, and so it was great to be able to just have that, be able to breathe a little, and having a big commitment from Creative Capital allowed me to then go to University of Houston and collaborate with them, because my project was in Houston, and then I could collaborate with someone else. It's like, oh, they're supporting you, so I'll give you some. Diverse Works teamed up, so it kind of helped. Like, I love the idea that we're giving you this money, we're investing in you, but it's also because we trust you, and we know your worth, so you can now go out and do the fundraising to get more funding, which really worked out. But I also remember that I had an exhibition, like my first solo show, at a gallery, and I was freaking out. And they said, you can apply for funds to get an assistant. I'm like, well, what do you mean, an assistant? So it wasn't even related to my project, but they knew that that's supporting me. So it was pretty amazing in that way. And I had to learn how to do the elevator pitch was great too, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That you read, and now I use those same assignments. I basically took that whole book and I use it for my professional practice class at school.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's pretty good.
I also had a question for you, Karen. So just thinking about timeline also, how much do you factor that in when you're looking at an application? How deeply do you look at a timeline?
I think that can tell you a lot about whether it's the right moment for a grant to be given. And I think the strongest applications, it's not, sometimes people are not in the right moment for the grant, and it feels like this project is almost finished, and the money would be better going to somebody who could use the whole support infrastructure. But sometimes I think people need help developing how to describe the way that they're thinking about their timeline, and they're not aware of it. And so that would be something that I would encourage people to talk to other people when they're doing the application about how they're laying out their own timeline, and be in dialogue with people about how you're thinking about the timeline. And one thing that I always find helpful when I'm reading grant applications or descriptions of projects is some sense of how people are imagining how long something is going to take, and why, and what is taking up that time, and where the blocks are, and things like that, and how you imagine getting over them. And so some sense of how you think about time as an artist in relation to your practice, and then how you put that into words to describe what that timeline is, I think is something to get help with, make sure not only that you're at the right moment, but also that you're able to convey how you're thinking about the project.
Yeah, thank you. Next slide. So we're committed to projects that are diverse in a number of different ways. Earlier I was talking about region, about trying to look for of different projects across the country. And then we're also looking for people of different ages. So the youngest person that's ever won the award is 26. We have a limit. You have to be at least 25 to apply for the award. And then the oldest, I believe, was 81. So we really are trying to look for a broad range of people from all age ranges. A lot of people come to us when they've sort of taken a break from their practice and then want to come back and do a really big project that they had been sitting on for a long time. And that's one of the most exciting things that we can fund, because we kind of get to rediscover somebody and share that with an audience that maybe knew them, but had been missing them for a little while. So yeah, that's something that's really exciting about the work. We're also thinking about demographics, so race, sexuality, gender. We're thinking about ability, background, all of these different factors, and especially when they become subject matters of the work, become really important to us, to making sure that we're representing what's happening across the country. And similarly, we're looking for people that are working in all different genres of media. So we've supported people that are working in sculpture, film, we've supported graphic novels, we've supported operas, major public interventions. We've supported a lot of things, a lot of very weird things. And we're really excited about the things that are especially weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking about with diversity, I remember my year, my project, and I forgot his name, he's such a good artist, damn it. Our projects were very similar. We were both doing images of what was behind, so kind of this thing about absence and the negative, and he was doing his project on the LA freeway, and I was doing it on the Houston freeway, and it's kind of amazing, and they said, this is a quandary, these projects are similar, but their reasons for being are completely different. Do we not fund one? So in the answer, in a way, the diversity thing worked out. They funded, in some ways, a very similar project. His wasn't a billboard, but what we were trying to do visually was the same, but for different reasons. So that was pretty exciting that they didn't just say, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, like, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the conceptual, the conceptual art projects that I heard about, that I still go to the Creative Capital website just to see what's happening in the world of conceptual and experimental art, because the projects are incredible and mind-blowing and important, and often have like 0 to tiny audiences. So it's like, that's one of the things I love too, is like creative capital isn't about like, you know, show us the impact of your work in terms of the number of people that are gonna see your performance or whatever. It's like, no, this work is impactful because it's asking deep questions about our culture right now and the systems that are operating in our culture. So I appreciate that so much as an artist that's usually having to like prove my worth in terms of numbers, you know?
Thank you. Okay, so what does it provide exactly? So it's $100,000 in funding and advisory services. So that breaks down to an initial funding of $15,000. And this, again, is something that you can use for whatever you would like. You can pay it on your credit card bills. You can pay for an artist assistant. You receive this money with no questions asked. And then after that, you have a pool of $35,000 that you're able to pull from at moments that you think are right. They're at your discretion. We ask that you send us in a little bit of a report outlining what you're going to be using the funding for, where you are in your project. That's as much of a way for us to like keep informed about where you are and what you're doing as it is for us to figure out where you might need help and where we can advise you to maybe find resources that you don't have to pay for, or maybe different connections that may exist in your own network, maybe somebody you met at the retreat who you might want to, you know, check back in with. But more often than not, these funds are, you know, pretty straightforward, and we've, again, funded some pretty weird things here too. So we're generous about what we support with that funding. And then we've sort of been talking about these advisory services, and then also networking opportunities, which again relates to the retreat. We also bring everyone in for an orientation a few months after they're named awardees, so that they can meet each other and do a little bit of this professional development work in a space together, so they can share their experience and sort of build bonds with each other. And then from there, after the orientation and the retreat, all of these services are available on request. So we have a pool of different consultants. There's like a little bit of a menu that is on an artist hub that you have access to as an awardee, and you can pick which service you need or browse through by name to see if there's somebody where you need support. Yeah, so that is a customized community of support. Really, our major focus is on providing connections in all phases of the award process, whether it be through our consultants, people at the retreat, through our panels of award reviewers that see your application as it's going through the process. We're really thinking about how we can put you in touch with the right people. Could you maybe, and I think you have talked about this already, but were there any other additional resources that you feel specifically help your project?
We got some really nice materials for the first time ever. You know, we were used to having like a photo shoot for the Fringe Guide or whatever, but we got like a beautiful folded thing with lots of images, and the text was gorgeous, and we had a special photo shoot just for that, and a marketing person who helped us develop it, and yeah, that was really great and kind of felt really special, like the first time we'd ever had something like that done. And that person was also, it was a tricky project, like it didn't lead to necessarily like a ton of performance opportunities for the project, but at least they helped us think through like how to approach people that might be able to give us performance gigs. So that was really helpful too.
Great.
I had a mentor. I'm trying to think, how did that happen? I think I might have been crying with Sean. Like, I don't know. And he found me this woman in Houston who was a serious businesswoman, and she was like a mother and a sister, but she kind of was emotionally supportive, but also kept me on track. Like, she kept to the business, to the numbers, to the like, making it happen. Like, she's like, okay, this is your deadline for next week. So she was really great at helping me with the financial, how do I handle this thing, the last year of the project. Now I feel like I have to get in touch with her. She was so good. I don't know how she came about, but Sean somehow found this person in Houston who met with me. We'd meet for coffee like once a month, and she'd kind of go through like what my goals were for the month for my project.
Let's try to find her.
Yeah.
Is that part of the infrastructure that you have? Because I know in
Thanks.
the writing world, there's more and more conversation now about accountability and how to hold oneself accountable by doing so in dialogue with a writing buddy or something like that. And is that one of the things that you've seen come out of the retreat, or?
I think informally, yeah, definitely. It's also something that we tell all of our applicants when they come to us, like personally for recommendations and here, just to like workshop your application with each other. And you know, I also think that the questions that we ask are a good template to use to write other applications, and a good basis for just like workshopping content and thinking through bigger ideas. We've had the response from different applicants that they've used it as a template just for that. But I think we don't have a specific service or like a person that facilitates that.
I mean, that seems to me like a good question to think about in the timeline question, like how do you keep yourself going over time, given the long time frame of this grant application?
Peers are very important. Okay, so these are the few requirements to apply for the award. You have to be eligible to receive income in the United States. So that means a permanent resident, a U.S. citizen, or an O-1 visa holder. And this is because of our status as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. If you have any questions about this, feel free to stay after and talk to me or shoot us an email. I'm happy to explain in detail what that means. You have to be at least 25 years old. And this ties to like a kind of like unofficial rule that we have that you need to have around 5 years of experience. And this doesn't have to be cumulative or definite. It just means that we can see that you've been committed to your practice for a reasonable like amount of time. You've finished your education if you pursued a higher education, or you've just been, you know, sharing your work with the public for more than just a few years. You kind of already have your feet on the ground and a sense of where you're going. And yeah, we need to see that you've been a working artist and that you're committed to your practice. And then finally, you cannot be enrolled in any full-time degree granting program. So this is for undergrad and graduate levels. If you are taking like continuing ed classes or non-traditional education somewhere else, that's totally fine. But if you are with an institution that provides a degree, you would have to wait until you apply. So it would be if you will receive the degree at the time of the award announcement, though. So if you are graduating in May of 2020, then you're safe to apply for the award in February. You just can't still be in the program when you're about to receive the award. So that's one little clarification.
Could I ask a question about the degree? If there's people here who have not been through a degree program, could you say a little bit about whether you think those people are at an advantage or disadvantage, and if that makes a difference for Creative Capital?
I don't think it makes much of a difference. I do think that a lot of the projects that we fund are because they're challenging and from a different perspective. And I think that the group of awardees that we've supported don't all have MFAs. They're not all coming from the same background. They're not all from art schools. They often work in totally different media. So and I think that does make a big difference at a lot of other granting institutions. But for us, I would say that does not factor into it at all.
I don't have an MFA. And a lot of the awardees that I've talked to and met with, especially around the financial piece of like supporting them as they work through the tax implications of the project or the award, they're low income folks. Like they're not people that are necessarily coming from education privilege or upper middle class background. So
Okay, so this application. So the open call is going to open up in February. It'll be open for the entire month. It is an online application, and you will be able to find the link to that application on our website once it's live. We'll also announce it on social media. You'll be able to see it. So during that first application, You're going to answer a set of 6 questions, which I will share in another slide. A detailed budget of your project, 6 work samples, a project description, and a timeline. So after you submit your application, around 2 different reviewers, not around, 2 different reviewers will look at your application. They'll be in the specific field where you work, and one of them will be within your region. So we really take the time to match you with the correct people to understand your work. So you're not just on, you're not submitting a novel to a group of dancers. You're not, submitting a social practice work to like a filmmaker and a sculptor, for instance. Not to say that those people wouldn't have valuable insight, but we really want to make sure that you're getting the most fair read that you possibly can. So then, if you are advanced to the next stage of review, you will be notified in June. And that would mean that you are reviewed, your application materials would be reviewed by another 2 reviewers. So again, this is another set of people that are a good match for your application, the contents that we've read as we've read them, and the disciplines that you've specified when you applied for the award. Finally, in September, if you've made it all the way to the final panel, you'll be notified at that time, and we will ask for a brief project update, and then we'll also send you a survey with a few different questions about different professional development or other sorts of resources that you might need, so that we can anticipate what the overall cohort of new artists coming in might need to focus on at the retreat or the orientation. And then if you make it all the way to that panel round, you're going to have your work reviewed by another 7 to 9 panelists, and they will be a variety of people from all different disciplines, and they come together for 2 days in our offices to sort of decide on who will receive the awards that year. And that final pool is usually around 100 people, and we will be awarding approximately 35 people per year moving forward. So it whittles down from a pretty big number of around 4,000 applicants, and then down to a pool of 1,000 in the second round, and then down to 100, and then finally 35. If you make it all the way to the panel stage, you will have the chance to be considered on our radar page. So this is a website where, if you consent, we will display images from your application and a link to your website and a brief description of your project. This is a great way to get exposure, and people look at this page when they're also looking at the press release for who just became a new awardee. They're announced in tandem usually. So even though you didn't receive the award, you will be featured this other way very prominently on our website for a period of time. You also, at that stage, are able to request panel feedback, and you will receive that shortly after you've received the decision that was made about your status in the panel round. So in each stage, you have a chance to have your work seen by 2 different professionals, and then at the very end, it's another 7 people. So it's at least 11 people that are looking at your application if you move all the way through. And there's a really big benefit in this, just being exposed to these new people that are really looking for work that they can support and follow, throughout its lifespan. I also want to say that about 30% of our awardees have applied to the award multiple times. Not that many people receive it on their first try, but I think sometimes it happens. I'm curious for both of you. Did you apply multiple times?
I think it was the first year that it was available, so.
I did it early.
Yeah.
So you got right in.
Times were different then.
I wouldn't get it
There weren't
now, I'll tell
4,000
you that.
applicants.
Okay, so a lot of our
We were
more
lucky.
recent applicants have told us that it's something that they keep coming back to, and they've also commented that it did help them refine their idea and really think more deeply about what it was that they were trying to produce. So if you don't get through the first time, don't be discouraged. We still want to see your work, And to reiterate, we, as in Creative Capital, are not the ones seeing your work. New panelists every year are the ones seeing your work. So there's a benefit in applying each year because completely different people are going to be making the call on whether or not you move forward in each stage. Okay. If you do move forward as an awardee, you'll be asked to submit project images, some descriptions, and other information so that we can add it to our website so that when we announce everyone in late December, early January, we have everything ready to go for your big debut. After that, we're going to bring you in for an orientation in the New York area. This would be in March 2021. And at that time, you're all brought together to just like meet, have a chance to see each other face to face, talk casually about your projects, but also get a sense of like who we are as an organization, how we can work together moving forward, and then we also have a chance to share some professional development resources with you. Yeah, and the number one thing that happens at that space is that you're introduced to what will be the presentation at the retreat. So we've been talking about this retreat, and I think I've failed to mention that the whole purpose of this retreat is that you present your project that you've just received the award for to a room of around 100 different industry professionals. So these are people working in all different fields. These are film producers, these are publishers, curators, agents, all kinds of people that are there and very eager to see new work and to meet you one-on-one. It's kind of like a adult camp environment. We are going to be on a campus at that time, sort of living in dorms for around a week. You'll have a little bit of time for prep at the retreat to give your presentation, and then you'll have casual time to speak with the consultants, these industry professionals that are on campus with you, and also with the other awardees. So you're really sharing intimate space for a considered period of time to make natural and facilitated connections that we arrange with you and the advisors and consultants that are there. So that is the retreat. And the orientation, you get a seedling of an idea of what the presentation is and the tools to prepare that presentation over the next few months to deliver at the retreat.
Can I ask a quick question about the retreat?
Yeah.
One of the things I saw on your website that I was impressed by was that you say with the funding that people can use money to pay for childcare.
Mm-hmm.
And for some grants of this nature, sometimes people who've got young children are put off by things that involve a lot of time, large chunks of time. And so if people are thinking that in the audience and thinking, I can't do that because of that time commitment, could they use some of the grant right up front to find childcare for that week so that they could participate in the retreat? Or
they can use some of the grant, yes. And then we do have a little bit of flexibility for providing services for people while they're at the retreat.
Okay.
It's a little bit difficult just because we are a nonprofit, so navigating those
Logistics.
details and making sure that there's fairness among all of the awardees can but you can definitely use the funding for that. That's something that we've done in the past. Some people who just can't make it have rescheduled and come to a later retreat, and then they're able to present at that time and then come back a second time after that. So you can move if something major comes up, even if it's not related to childcare. We are flexible in that way as well.
And I know ability is one of the things that you mentioned in diversity, so I'm assuming that there would be flexibility and accessibility and support for people who have special needs in different areas.
Yes, so right now we're at Bard College, and we spent a considerable amount of time making sure that the entire footprint of the campus, all the spaces that we were using were ADA accessible. We have a transportation system in place so that people can get across the campus, and we also have different paths marked out that are wheelchair accessible.
Great.
And then in terms of people who are deaf or hard of hearing, we're working to have translators in the space, and then we also have amplification services for people so that if they're in a situation like this, they don't have to rely on just hearing room amplified sound, they can hear something.
Great.
Yeah.
And just back to the childcare thing, I brought my 3-month-old baby to the retreat because he
Ooh.
was nursing and I couldn't not bring him. And at the time in 2002, it was a little unusual and it was a little, I wouldn't say frowned upon, but, oh God, is that mine? I'm so sorry.
Ooh.
It wasn't, thank you. I'm so embarrassed. I'm sorry.
It's your baby.
Speaking of
It's a
children.
kid.
It's your baby. Yeah.
Yeah, my son who's now 17. It wasn't frowned upon, but I didn't feel like comfortable and embraced. But since then, I think things have gotten a lot better, and I have found the retreat since then to be more child-friendly, more artists bringing their kids, bringing partners and other people so that they can have the support needed to be able to really show up and be present at the retreat. So that's something I think is really improving and really awesome about Creative Capital compared to other art spaces I've been in that are not nearly as baby-friendly, child-friendly, parent-friendly.
Yeah. I will say it's something that we're definitely thinking about, and you can speak with us about it if you have any questions from the very beginning. If you're hesitating to apply for that reason, please reach out to us to talk about it. And then after that, after the retreat, you have the ability to check in with us whenever you need about your project or about anything else that's going on with you. If you think that you really need to use some of your original funding that's unrestricted to help with some life stuff, that's okay. If you need financial counsel that's beyond the scope of your project, that's encouraged. We understand that finances are a holistic thing. We're always there to talk about anything that you need with your project. We're kind of there as a sounding board for you whenever you need it. That being said, we're not producers. We can't solve all of your problems for you, and we aren't able to ourselves help you put on an exhibition somewhere, but we will work our best to help you find connections and to sort of direct you in the right way to work on something. Okay, so in the past year, we have switched from opening up the application to only a few different disciplines at once on a rotating basis to opening up the application to people working across all media. So as a way to accommodate that, we've come up with all of these different categories to fulfill what we saw as a kind of comprehensive list of the different ways that people are working today. So when you apply for the award, you're able to pick 2 of these different disciplines. And I encourage you to be very careful about these 2 disciplines, because whichever of these you pick is what we use to match you with the consultants who are reviewing your application. So if you are working in 2 totally disparate media, definitely list those. But if you really are working only in one media, if you're really only making narrative film, but you kind of think about it as, conceptually as a form of theater, just stick to narrative film, because a theater person is not going to know how to understand your work. Similarly, if you are somebody who is, normally working in digital media, but you've decided to work on a piece that is primarily installation, you might want to consider only focusing on installation so that it's clear to the reviewer what your project is going into it. That might be a kind of difficult example, but what I'm trying to say is that if you're torn on choosing any of these different terms, you should think first about what your project is and what you're hoping to produce, and then you can talk about if you've worked in a different way previously within your application materials and within the work sample descriptions themselves. A lot of people come to the application wanting to do something new and totally different than what they've done before, and we're really happy to support that. But you should make sure that you're listing that discipline that you're hoping to produce within the project, rather than describing your previous practice that you may be better known for. And again, this is just so we can match your application with the right person.
would you discourage people from trying to think strategically about this list? Like, maybe there's not going to be very many puppeteers, so I'll go for that and emphasize that part of my animation over animation, for
Oh, that's
example.
interesting.
If it has puppets, I mean,
So is that a strategic
I don't
way of
know.
thinking, or as long as it's within the spirit of the actual work?
I don't think that would give somebody an edge, if that's what you're asking.
Yes, that is what I'm asking.
That's mainly used. This is mainly used for clarity, for people to
For
understand.
matching.
Yeah, like so puppetry is interesting because the likelihood of us finding a puppeteer is like somebody who's
It's
just
also my
a
pitch for
puppeteer
puppeteer.
is just like a little bit slim.
Yeah.
So we ask people that have a like an experience in multiple different places.
Yeah.
So if you say puppetry, somebody is definitely going to have some sort of experience with like live performance and would have some peripheral engagement with puppetry. But it's mainly important for that reason.
So if you're the application, they're looking at the proposal, but they're going to look at your former work, your previous work, or no?
They're going to look at whatever work samples you're presenting.
Because I remember, this was like a Rome Prize thing. I applied the 4th time I finally got it. But the other times, there was a point where I had a new project idea, and they liked it. This is when they did the follow-up. But because they hadn't seen it evidenced in the work, they couldn't trust it. So what happens if someone has made sculpture, and their whole portfolio is
They wanna do
sculpture,
something.
but they have this great film idea, but they don't have a single film? How does that get, how do you?
I mean, I can
I'm just
say
wondering.
if it's helpful to say from a reviewer perspective, my experience on the panel was that there was a lot of interest in applications that were really demonstrating growth of the applicants, and where you could see that the person was pushing themselves with this new project in a way that was very interesting and exciting. And that doesn't necessarily mean a departure from what the mode that they were working in before, but finding some way to express how this is a moment of growth, I think is interesting. And when it's a case of something that looks like a break, I think trying to explain that bridge and how you got there would be a useful thing for reviewers to have in hand. But I think it would be of interest.
Yeah, and I would say the most critical thing that you can use is the work sample description. So giving context of how that particular work sample relates to the project that you're proposing. If you are showing previous work, most people are showing previous work, and they're grounding it in like the small facets that may be in the work that are evidence that apply to whatever it is that they're producing in the future. So those notes are really, really critical. And people will have already read all of your written answers, your very pointed 6 questions, which we will still get to, but then also your description and timeline. So they have a mental image of whatever it is that you're talking about. So the actual work samples are to help them like literally see that and get a chance to like sort of start to build out that idea. So if you can guide them through that, through your writing, that's probably your best option.
And like if you're taking on a whole new set of skills that you need to develop for a new medium, I think having that in the timeline and how you intend to go about that would be useful, because otherwise I think people are going to be like, when are you going to do that?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to show you a few different examples of creative capital projects that we funded in the past. So this is a work by Post Commodity called Repellent Fence. They're an artist collective comprised of Raven Chacon, Cristobal Martinez, and Cade L. Twist. They're 3 indigenous artists. There's 26 tethered scare eye balloons, which are enlarged replicas of an ineffective bird repellent product. And they're 10 feet in diameter, and they were floated 50 feet above the US-Mexico border. They created a temporary 2-mile-long sculpture, and for the 4-day period the work was constructed, it was the largest binational land art piece in existence. So.
The piece is called the Repellent Fence. And what we are proposing to construct is a 2-mile long ephemeral monument that crosses the border. And so our goal with this is to create a metaphor that acts like a suture. It's like stitching the United States and Mexico together.
So here's just a brief overline of their timeline. So they received the award in 2012. The project premiered in 2015. In 2015, they also began a collaboration with documentary filmmakers. And then in 2017, the documentary premiered at South by Southwest and then screened on POV digital platforms on PBS. So yeah, the full time span of their work was around 5 years. I'm going to go through these a little bit quickly just so we can get to a few other details, so bear with me if I'm going too fast. Okay, so this is a work by Paul Beatty. It's his novel The Sellout, which is about a young man's isolated upbringing and the race trial that sends him to the Supreme Court. So Paul received the award in 2009, and then in 2015, Farrar, Straus, and Giroux published The Sellout. In 2015, he also used funding to translate and find international publishers. And in 2016, Paul won the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Booker Prize. He was the first American author to win, with the support of the Creative Capital Award.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, it's great.
So good.
But you can see it took him about 6 years before he published the book.
Yeah.
So we were there with him, talking him through it the whole way. Yara Travieso, her project, La Medea, is a reimagining of Euripides' violent tragedy into a dance theater performance and feature film a la Latin disco pop variety show. I'll show you a little bit of that now. So in 2016, Yara received the Creative Capital Award. In 2017, it premiered, so that was a little bit quicker than usual. And then in 2018 through 2019, it toured across the country. So Yara went directly into a residency at Brick in Brooklyn to workshop the piece right after the award. And she received the funding with a plan to pay her performers and musicians involved in the piece, and she was able to do that after receiving funding. The whole project was directed, performed, and edited in real time, and it premiered at Brick, where she had the initial residency, and is currently still touring the country. Okay. So this next project is by Evan Roth. This is a digital animation project that appears on iPads and other outdated electronic media. He's been filming sites all over the world where cables that make the internet possible emerge from the ocean. So he received the award in 2016. He began filming in Guam and Hawaii through national parks sponsorships in those places. In 2018, Red Lines premiered as a free artwork accessible online. And then in 2019, it was adapted as a museum exhibition and public artwork. So his project is an example of something that was originally funded as something smaller that became something much bigger. So it moved from this project, which is incredible and is great as a work that exists online, but to now have it expand to exhibitions and public artworks is really amazing. And we'd love to see like these different lives that come of our projects. Okay, the next project is by Wes Hurley. Potato Dreams of America is an autobiographical narrative feature film chronicling the artist's childhood as a closeted gay kid in the disintegrating USSR and his adventurous journey to the United States with his mother, who was a prison doctor turned mail-order bride. So here's a little bit of a clip.
Mom was saying that she was disillusioned with Russian man, so she started applying to all those mail-order bride catalogs.
I became pen pals with an old American gentleman who was very excited that I was a Russian Orthodox.
He seemed nice and kind.
James lived in Seattle, and that's why he brought me to visit. At first everything was great. He was very kind and fatherly to me, but also he would lose his patience quite often. I also realized that our concept of religion was different.
When Mom came back, she was glowing. And then she took out this ring, and that's when I knew that her and James got married.
So Wes just received the award this past year. He had spent years looking for funding for this award, for this project, and people weren't responding. So this is an example of where Creative Capital sort of swooped in to pick up something that might be a little bit risky and a little bit strange. That clip that I just showed you is some of the first cuts of footage that Wes has filmed. So it's a baby premiere here with you tonight. Yeah, he was able to start filming right after the award. Actually, I think in between orientation and retreat, he started filming and is currently doing it right now. So yeah, he's been able to make very quick progress in a short period of time. Okay, what do we ask on the application? So these are the questions, these 6 questions that I mentioned earlier, or 5. Is it 5 now? Okay. These are the main criteria that the reviewers look at when they are looking at your applications. We ask them to focus on this first. So we ask them to think about how your work exists in the context of a larger like artistic context, and also like in the context of the world, the current political moment. We're asking them to think about how your project takes on an original and imaginative approach to content and form. We're asking them to think about what specific audiences might this project engage, making sure that you know who this work is for and what kind of life it might have once it's launched. We're also asking how your project might act as a catalyst for your artistic and professional growth. So thinking about this idea of why you, why now, is one of the things we say is critical to all of our applicants. Really focusing on why it is you that should be making this project, what sort of particular voice you bring to the subject matter or the specific discipline that you're working in, and why right now? Like, why this moment in history? Why in this context? Like, what has precipitated to make this moment the moment for your work? Yeah, and I think that, again, like whether or not you end up submitting your application, these questions are really, really helpful for shaping the way that you approach a project. And then finally, we ask how you would use the non-monetary resources to help you realize your goals. So that's these other things that we were talking about today. And this is something that we look at to figure out who we're inviting into our community, to making sure that there's somebody who's, you know, in a generous spirit, that they're working not only for themselves, but for other people, that they're in an active position in their career where they are thinking about growing a little bit. And this sort of openness is something that we're looking for when we're bringing in new awardees.
Sometimes I saw people leave questions blank.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or just only write one line, or like not use the full amount of space, and that, you know, I think is not a good thing to do.
Yeah, no.
Answer all the questions.
So just to reiterate, nobody on Creative Capital's staff reviews any of your applications. This is really a moment where you're only being looked at by somebody that works in your field, and then also at least one person who is working in your region. So this is not something that we as an organization are using our judgment on. It is really the view of a very large pool of reviewers that is choosing each year's award group. That being said, These are the prompts that we ask them to consider when they're looking at every application. And these are very, very similar to the questions that I just showed you, which are on the application itself. But yeah, you can kind of see how these things match up to all the questions that I just shared. I wanted to ask you both about when you first applied for the award, how you were thinking about these different services that Creative Capital offers. These things beyond the financing that we give you, beyond the money. If you were thinking about like Creative Capital specifically as an asset in that sense, that we would be able to provide something other than just funding, or if maybe that was a secondary concern.
No, for me, definitely. I mean, I went to grad school for ceramics, then quickly I started making installations. So it just didn't seem feasible. How am I going to keep on making these big works that no one wants, I can't afford? So I was very aware of like, maybe they can help me figure out how do I not go into a deeper hole, or how do I be more proactive as opposed to saying, oh, poor me, I'm making this work and I can't really sustain it. So it really was, for me, it was super helpful.
That's great.
I had kind of mixed feelings about it, if I'm honest. Like, I'm very anti-capitalist and anti-elitist, and some of the ways that Creative Capital can feel like this elite network of people with power in the art world, I've had some feelings of negativity about that. And yet, there are people, so again, like I feel like the most important relationships that I developed at the retreat were other artists, not the agents and presenters and curators that were there. And yet, I think it was, I'm sure it was professionally useful to meet those people, and for those people to know it did leverage our work into new spaces, because people they treat you with more seriousness when they know that you've received this support. So on that level, it was useful.
I think for me, it kind of reinforced that it was okay that I was not going to be a gallery artist. As opposed to thinking, how am I going to make work that's commercial? It was almost like, we can help you figure out to make the work you're making. And every once in a while I have moments like, why am I not a gallery artist? But it was great to actually realize it's okay. I'm not going to be someone who makes work that's consumed in that way. So it's kind of a capitalism thing against, but it kind of allowed me to stick with what I believe in, what I'm making. And I had no other choice but to make my work and be okay with it. It's like, it's okay. You know? So.
And I felt like the review board was also like very diverse in terms of being open to all those different types of artists and not looking for people to be one kind of artist or another, which I appreciated.
Yeah. Something that I also want to ask you about, we ask the panelists to focus on determining if an artist is really ready to receive the award. Could you speak a little bit about how you gauge that when you're reading an application, either for Creative Capital or elsewhere, how you think about readiness and judging whether or not the artist seems that they're at the right place in their career?
Well, I think a lot is in the hands of the applicants in terms of what you tell us about your own process and where you are in it. And so I felt like part of the people who seemed most ready were partly the people who did the best job of articulating where they were and able to do that, you know, which there might have been artists in the pool who were also ready, but it's not as legible. So I would say the legibility of your readiness is a really important part of helping the panelists make that decision. And there were some people where we felt like they may or may not be ready, and people were very interested in the project, but if it wasn't clear, they maybe came lower in the priority list over those that felt like, okay, we're sure about this one. When you're choosing among so many people, you have to make some decisions. So it's worth working hard, I think, at that. But I think that question of readiness also is partly about the nature of this grant and the people who could, you know, I think a lot of that readiness question intersected with the question of who was most able to make use of the support that was given at that stage and the particular nature of these opportunities. Sometimes people felt like they were too late, you know, that it was almost done and that it just would be better going to somebody else.
Great. So context really.
Yeah, and other people, you know, there were definitely people that we felt like we loved the project, and everybody was agreed, no, this is great, but it's too early, and if this person takes this into these workshops and things, they're just not there yet. And so, you know, there were definitely some people in the pool where everybody really wanted that person to be encouraged to apply again and get feedback and that kind of thing. So I felt like it was a very generous and diverse and open-minded group of people that you put together, and so I felt good about grant-giving bodies or this grant-giving body being in that process.
Okay, just a few things about work samples. When you're submitting work samples, again, you'll have the ability to submit 6. So these can be writing samples, they can be video, they can be images, they can be audio files. For anything that's time-based, each sample should only be 3 minutes long. And then for images, that's a single image, so 6 single images. For writing, it's around 5 pages per sample. So you can do these in combination with one another. And for like the intricacies of that, there's details on the application itself. But one of the things I would advise against is trying to submit multiple images within like a PDF or something. That won't look great. That space is reserved for people who are writers. That being said, if you are a filmmaker and you're working on a project and you have video of previous works, but you happen to have nothing but a script for a new work, that's a great time to use a combination of writing and video in one place. So you can get creative about how you use those. Something about video, please make sure to put your password somewhere in the description or even the title of the work sample. It's always really heartbreaking when people don't remember to do this. We try to track you down, but sometimes we don't know until it's almost near the end. An application reviewer tips us off. Some people, we've also seen that their links go dead, or something else changes. They change the sharing settings. Just be mindful of this. It's really, really critical. And yeah, work samples are a place where a lot of otherwise interesting proposals can fall apart, because again, when you're answering these questions and you're getting a picture in the reviewer's eye and they come to something that maybe isn't documented that well, or that isn't giving some sort of explanation of how it relates to what they had just described, it kind of is like the deciding thing at the end of the day that makes or breaks an application. So I really encourage everyone to think about documentation from the very beginning of budgeting a project or from envisioning a project. If you are working in performance, that means really figuring out a way to pay a videographer. If you are working as a visual artist, paying a real studio photographer to come in and properly light and photograph your work. If you ever have an exhibition with a gallery, that's a really wonderful chance to take advantage of their services. If you are working with a presenting space on a performance, if you can ask them if they have any kind of in-house recording capabilities, that could be a great way to get recordings. But yeah, this is something to really strategize about, especially if you are the kind of artist that isn't making work that is necessarily financially viable. If grant making is the #1 way that you bring in income, this is a really, really critical part. And it's hard to think about making work just for a grant application, but sometimes you really have to be thinking that way as soon as you start a project.
You have to think about the money shot.
Yeah. It's
That's
true.
That's what I call them, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about social media and artist websites?
Sure.
Because the work samples that are submitted are very controlled, right, and limited. But some of the review processes I've been involved with, you see people looking outside of what is that controlled narrative and bringing in what they find elsewhere. And sometimes that's consistent with the application, and other times it's very different. Either it seems like the work is actually finished, or the work is not what it says it is, or, you know, and I've been involved with other panels where the reviewers are not allowed to do that you're not allowed to bring in any extraneous material, but I wonder if you've seen that, how you've seen that come up, and if you have advice about that for prospective applicants.
Yeah, we do ask for a website, and we're not going to stop anyone from, Googling you. That being said, most reviewers have at least 50 applications that they're looking at. So the likelihood that they're going to spend a lot of time looking at your personal website or anything outside of your application is slim. So I would not rely on having that as a resource for the application. Yeah. And we definitely do try to keep it to the application, especially at the very end, when
rather than bringing in outside experience.
Trying to focus it in. But yeah, I've also seen in other panels that it's
I felt
really
like it was a
only
very
about
fair
it.
process, so that in the pool that we were looking at, there were more and less well-known people, and I felt like everybody was treated really equally in a way that was great.
It's hard though to control
when you know.
Or even just a name, you
wasn't-
can go to the internet and
Yeah.
But I would definitely say don't rely on that as an additional resource. Okay. Project descriptions. So yeah, I actually just want to ask everyone, for both of you, how do you approach this writing process for the descriptions, and then what maybe catches your eye the most for a description when you're reading it? Just so where do you start when you're thinking about describing your project? What's your...
I think what the experience is going to be, because often it's experiential. But I'm trying to do this with my students. Don't use big words.
Yeah.
Don't have long sentences. Be as concise. You still sound smart, even if you're not using the big words. Just be as concise as you can.
Yeah.
So you want to fill the space up, but don't fill that space up. Because again, they're reading 50, so if it starts to be lots of words,
Academic
sounding
language.
extra smart, you're like, oh, painfully in the 50th.
Yeah, I think in other grants and project descriptions, I have felt like I was trying to kind of craft it so that foundation would think it was a good project. But with Creative Capital, I kind of feel the opposite. I feel like the description should really be whatever wild and outrageous project you have in mind, you should just describe that project as much as you can. Not, you haven't created it yet or worked on it yet, but giving visual imagery, but just let your imagination go wild, way more than in other
Well, you should say also what your hopes, what the
What your
emotive,
dreams
what you're
are.
hoping, how it's going to matter
Right.
to
Yeah.
someone,
Yeah.
Or
why you
what-
care.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That has
I
to be part
really
of it.
think that, and I'm a film theorist, but I think when things get really overworked and there's a sense of trying to demonstrate qualification or something, it's not very compelling. And I think the most compelling thing is where you can really feel why this matters to the artist, what they're aspiring to do, why you're excited about it, what your vision of it is, and what your voice is, so that there's a sense of you being in the room when we're all comparing these different works and being like, I love this one, and there is real excitement around the projects that have got that feeling of something that really matters to somebody and wanting to help move that along.
One practical piece of advice, make sure to say what it is that you're doing right at the beginning. That's really important and something that people get bogged down.
Yeah,
with.
you get to the end and you're like, what is it?
It's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
Why apply? We've talked about it being designed to help you communicate your goals and clarify them, about how it's going to be seen by several people, seen on our radar page. All of these things we like to think of as assets, even if you don't win the award. And then, just this question of why you, why now is always at the top of our reviewers' minds. We love ambition. We're interested in taking risks. That being said, we want to make sure that you definitely have the experience and the passion to execute that. By experience, I don't mean that you've produced this fantastical sort of project before, but that you've carried through, a multi-year project or something that has multiple moving parts. We want to know that you are serious. Make sure your timeline fits. Again, if you're coming to us for finishing funds, we're going to, sniff that out, and you're not going to get advanced. The one time when we do use the internet is to make sure that our finalists have not already started producing their project or lied about where they were in the timeline. It's one of the few times when we do make sure. Apply more than once. It's a good exercise just to keep thinking through your ideas, but a lot of people have applied multiple times before receiving the award. And then finally, stay connected to us. Be in touch. And I'm going to open it up at that point. I know we've maybe gone over a little bit further than anticipated. I'm going to come around with a mic for questions. I do want to say that if you could be mindful of keeping the questions to things that would be beneficial for everyone in the room. And then if you want to stick around after really briefly or to catch up with us on email, any specific questions can come to me. Okay, so does anyone have?
There's one.
Hi. I don't know if you guys.
I think that's the mic
Hello?
that is only going in the other room.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
It's good?
Yeah.
You can hear it? Okay, great.
I'm sorry if I missed this. I came in a little late. Could you just talk a little bit more about where in the process the artist should be with the project? Do you want it at the very beginning stages or somewhere in the middle acceptable?
That's a great question. It can be sort of started, but as close to the beginning as possible is ideal for us. So when you're first thinking of the project, maybe you've done a few test runs, you've sort of played around with the idea a little bit. That's all great. We just want to make sure that you haven't already shown the work in some realized capacity, that you haven't shot everything if it's a film. Workshopping is fine. There are development is a very broad term, but generally leaning towards the very early stages is what we look for.
So if you're making a documentary film and you're already in production or midway through production, is that too far advanced then?
I would say if you're midway through and you see the process maybe taking a few more years to complete and you still haven't figured out the next phases of the project, then yes, that's fine. Yeah. What else?
There's one bit now.
Thank you. Just following up on the apply often or more than once, would you suggest applying with the same project year after year? And two, are there opportunities for feedback after hypothetically being rejected?
So you do have the chance for feedback if you make it to the finalist round. Because we receive thousands of applications, there isn't a way that everyone can receive feedback. But once you get to that very last pool of people, if you are in that top group, we do record notes of everything that's said in the room for 2 days, and you do receive a transcription of those notes. In terms of applying more than once, we encourage people to apply with different projects or slightly different projects or projects that have significantly changed since the last time that they applied. That being said, there are new reviewers each year, so new people will be looking at your project each time.
Do you have an example somewhere of here's the grants that were accepted and this is why we love these applications, or here's really what not to do?
We don't, because they're all very, very, very different. And we have looked at a selection of them, and they end up looking like templates. And we don't want people to imitate something else that's already been submitted, because, again, the best applications are ones that are very unique and specific to the voice of the applicant. So we don't for that reason.
Yeah, I would really reinforce that. The successful ones look very different from each other, and the ones that were not successful also look very different from each other. You know, so I would say, you know, don't try not to think about who your competitors are, and instead put all that energy into thinking about how to communicate your project.
Yeah.
And I think that will be the most successful thing.
I don't believe this is working, but I'll pretend anyway.
It's working.
What are you looking for in the recommendations that you solicit? Don't you require 2 recommendations from people in your field?
So the recommendations that we ask for, those are just people that you've worked with that can vouch for their understanding of your practice. We ask for community references, which I think is an optional thing. If you're already having conversations with people that might share your work. So people, those would definitely be people that you've had some sort of working relationship with. The other people could be like advisors or peers. We don't contact those people, just to let you all know, unless there are very specific questions from one of our panelists, and then they can reach out for further information.
Is it possible, or have you ever had a group to apply that's working on the same project together?
That's a great question, and one that I'm sad to have glossed over. Thank you for bringing that up. You can definitely apply as a collaborative team. One thing that I will say that's very important about collaborative projects, make sure that you all understand that you're applying as one entity. We tell people that they should only apply if they've worked together as a collaborative before. Your application has to have materials of your collaborative work. And there are some, like, we'll kind of bend on that sometimes, but we need to see some sort of idea of what you do as a group. You're also entering a financial relationship with each other and with us. So yeah, collaborations can definitely apply, but just make sure you've really thought about like the seriousness of what that means to each other. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
You talked about demonstrating your willingness to share afterwards, right? Could you talk about that a little bit more, and what's required, like what does Creative Capital require after your project? Is there some kind of report or anything like that?
So I think by sharing, I'm referring to like the social element of the retreat. Like you're there, you're speaking with the other awardees, you're speaking with all the visitors that we brought in. There's that sense of just showing up in the world. There are other awardees that we have, like Amy, who have worked with us in a professional capacity offering workshops. Some of our awardees come back as advisors to work with other artists. So some of them serve on our panel. So it's just kind of being like willing to stay in conversation with us. In terms of the project, like after it's premiered, you mean like after it's reached the end of its, you don't have to give us anything. We will follow what you're doing and we want to know what you're doing so we can share it. You don't have to give us a report by any means. Is there anyone else? We got everyone?
Can I just check? This
Yeah.
is taxable income, right? So when people are thinking about
Yes.
budgeting this amount of money
Yes.
that you're putting on, they also need to bear in mind tax on that money. Right?
Yes, that is very important and another thing that's relevant for collaborators.
There might even be a tax client of mine in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things I talked about at the orientation in March was the tax liability that's associated with the award and how to prepare for that. Because for a lot of artists, $50,000, depending on whether you get it over 2 years or 3 years.
I mean, it
You
can
have
be
4 years. It depends on how quickly, how much you get in each taxable year, in each tax year. But it can be impactful. It can have a significant tax liability associated with it. So it's good to be prepared for that. And Creative Capital, through me and other people like me, will help you figure that out.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you to everyone who's watching us. I'm really excited to see everyone's applications very soon. If you have any specific questions for me, please feel free to reach out. I think that our email is right up there, just awards@creative-capital.org. So thank you so much for coming. And thank you to our wonderful panel
Thank you.
and to Philly Cam.